Welcome back to Roadmap, Auto Trader UK's product and tech podcast. And I'm not a big fan of one-to-ones. It's a bit harsh because they're dead intense, but it's a pleasure today. I've got a head-to-head chat with Amelia Bampton, engagement manager at Equal Expert. So, hey, Amelia.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
That's all right. Thanks for coming over to the offices. Obviously, we're going to chat today about career paths, and the thing we're talking about is learning to unlearn. So that's a fascinating one, that. So before we kick off, so obviously we're just chatting, engagement manager at Equal Expert. So who is Amelia and what is that role?
Oh, starting off with the deep questions.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe we don't go into who. But.
We haven't got enough time. I work for Equal Experts. Equal Experts are a kind of global tech consultancy. I work out of the Manchester office. So as a tech consultancy, we will go in, work with different clients across many industries, different size companies and clients, and we will build out bespoke kind of software delivery kind of products and services to kind of support clients on their own technology journey at different points in that.
Cool. That sounds super impressive.
Thank you.
That's all right. So the thing we're talking about today is, and we're going to do a little bit different format we're talking about, is like you're going to lead and I'm going to ask you loads of questions. So it's really about your professional journey and the big things you've learned to unlearn. Can you learn to unlearn? Learn to unlearn along the way. So whether that be, I think we talked about, there's times you have to pivot, there's times U-turns, times you feel like you're sort of backed in a corner and you need to do something different. So what is this and how did you come across this sort of concept of having to unlearn?
Yeah, it's great. I think for me, so I've worked in tech for 20 years. I've been blessed to have kind of started my career in tech and then seen it through. But what's interesting, when you actually take some moments and conversations like this to actually look back and reflect, it gives you that perspective of how much has changed for me over that time.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation we're going to have today. But even just looking back to, I started as a business analyst. I had to go to London to start my career, even though the accent probably gives it away, very northern, kind of born and bred, did a lot of my education and university within the north as well. But at the time, early noughties, I entered the job market. Yes, Auto Trader was here, and I think there was maybe one or two other big brands, but it wasn't the kind of Manchester tech scene it is today. That I went to London, started in consultancy. But yeah, just on reflection, I just love looking back and seeing how with your career, you never know what the next chapter is going to hold, especially in tech. Like when I started in tech, the term product wasn't being used. We didn't talk about product. There weren't those roles. And like, look at the world today, in the landscape, there's kind of, a range of roles you can do in and around that space. So I love how it evolves with time and how my career has also evolved. Like I went from being a BA into delivery and then into more portfolio management, kind of managing multiple kind of projects at any one point. Kind of in-house as well, and then back out to consultancy, which is where I am today. And again, that role of engagement manager is kind of managing multiple accounts at any one time. So I just love how when you look back, you can see all the pivots and changes, how your roles changed and kind of how you've had to adapt yourself personally and also the skill set you bring to work to kind of manage that journey. And I love that, but we don't often give ourselves that time to reflect.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because when you say like BA to like delivery to portfolio, because obviously we've had probably similar career paths. I started in 97, I think. And you're right, because I was working in Liverpool, but I had no concept of what product was. I was working on green screen, VAX stuff for logistics software, but I'd never really thought about the bit of I learned stuff in my first job that now I definitely don't do it that way and like avoid doing it that way. But never really thought about that bit of unlearning. So what, like we were talking through specific topics. So what is the, if you were telling your like these are my lessons, so what is your first one if you're going like this is my first like little story of things that you've had to either learn or adapt considerably?
I think I'm really passionate about this topic. You'll probably be able to gauge that, because there was kind of a key moment in my career when I went on. I was doing a similar chat to this with one of the coding boot camps in Manchester, and I had this shiny presentation of my career. And I was like, I got a few minutes in, and there were all these kind of like lovely eager faces on the other end of the Zoom. And I was like, I kind of put the presentation of what I was going to say in the bin a little bit. And I was like, do you know what? I just want to get real. I know I can talk through in a couple of shiny slides, this great, but you need to know what's gone on behind the scenes. You know, the person I am now, and I might be very extrovert and very confident. That's the version a lot of people, I'm very chatty, the version people see of me every day in work. But that's been 20 years in the making. You know what I mean? One of the stories I love to share is like that graduate version of Amelia early noughties, getting the 5 a.m. train from Stockport down to London, you know, to be at my desk for 8:30, you know, good, diligent, kind of like a kind of career focused professional. I didn't speak up. With what I needed. Like, I used to live in Didsbury. There was an office in Didsbury. Did I ever say, oh, it'd be really helpful to work from the office that I could actually walk to? No. I got that 5 a.m. train because they'd placed me in London, because it aligned to kind of some of the clients in public sector at the time they wanted me to do. So, you know, I've seen the world change. I've seen the kind of next generation coming through the kind of tech career market. And I love how more empowered people are. They speak up for the work-life balance, the working arrangements that work for them, you know, post kind of pandemic and everything like that. And I love that, because that version of me at early 20s, I never said anything about what would work for me personally and how I could bring my best self to work. And it might be helpful to not be in London Monday to Friday at my own expense. I never claimed any expenses. I know it's tragic now, but I think it's important for me to kind of reflect on that version, that it took me a good few years to actually build my confidence to actually put on the table with whoever I'm working for at the time. But like, hey, can we talk about what might work for me here? Because then I can turn up as a better version of myself, etc., and add more value. But yeah, that wasn't me. And people find that even in meetings, I hardly spoke. My husband finds it hilarious. He would love to find that version of me. I think, again, that kind of it's a bit quieter at times. But yeah, it's amazing, you know, when you look back, how much I've evolved in that space.
So what was I mean, I get that. I at one point I was living in Manchester, commuting to Liverpool, and we had a office in Old Trafford for the firm I worked for. And similar, I'd go like diligently to Liverpool every day of the week. And then there was a point, I remember, for some reason Liverpool was closed. I went to Manchester office and started talking, and people were like, oh, why don't you work here one day a week or 2 days a week? And then it was like there was a moment when, and then it was like, oh, it's okay to ask for permission for this thing. I mean, longer term, it didn't quite work out. But was there a moment where you went, actually, this isn't working for me? So that, like you said, to get your best self, or to get actually the best out of Amelia, like speaking up is the right thing. Did it just happen naturally over time, or was there a moment when you go, actually, this is a time where I do need to say something?
Do you know what? It probably wasn't in that job and wasn't in that stage of my career. I think it was other people like you that were like, you're mad, you know, when senior managers knew I was kind of paying for everything myself, and there was an office. I started to get more balance. But I'd say the confidence in me probably came when I returned to work after both of my maternities. I've done every working pattern there is under the sun. I've done a 4-day week, a 9-day fortnight. I've had the day off with my kids, and then I went down to, I think I was feeling the pinch a little bit, working full time. Pre-pandemic, I was in Manchester 5 days a week, and I went down to 4 days, and I had that day to myself. It was a beautiful chapter in my career. I'm back up to 5 days, you know, the kids are in school, what have you. But I think it was only when I had the kids and I had to kind of be more confident in working out as a working parent, what working pattern would work for me and them, and then also just balancing kind of that working parenting life. That was a big milestone, me speaking up and saying, I'm going to take this day for myself because I'm just finding the pace all a little bit much. And, you know, I was 100% a different person coming out of that kind of 4-day week when I had a day to myself.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a bit is, if you don't ask, well, you don't get. But it's the same one as of going, isn't it? That I've seen it previous employers, that people have been that bit where they're running at a pace that they can't, isn't sustainable. And rather than like us recognising and then maybe being able to retain that talent, that this is like a consultancy I worked at, is they've left.
Yeah.
Because they're looking for that slightly different pattern. And it's the bit where when they leave, is he going, well, if you'd have actually asked, that is an option we've got on the table. It's like, it's not that it wasn't there. It's just because sometimes you just don't know they're there. So it is an interesting one.
Yeah.
So then one of the other things, like when you were talking through like some of the other topics, so one that, again, because of similar career patterns, you mentioned about the whole transformation from yourself working in a waterfall environment to Agile, and how that, again, challenged your brain on the way you had to think and approach things.
Yeah, it was. So I talk about it a lot. It was such a kind of key milestone and kind of quite pivotal point in my career. So like I said, I started in consulting, but then I went in-house to, again, left the company to come away from the travel, as was consulting at that point. So I went, looked for jobs within kind of in-house tech teams, went to Vodafone for 7 years. A lot of their B2B tech was in and around Manchester as opposed to their head office in Newbury. So that served me well. But at the time, Vodafone were a little bit slower to get on the Agile bus, especially in some of the teams I was working with. So Waterfall was all I knew. It's like you don't know what you don't know. Came to the end of my kind of career with Vodafone, was looking for something different after 7 years. I'd kind of seen ThoughtWorks, been to some of their events, saw that they were kind of doing things differently.
Yeah.
And it just looked cool and exciting, which it was. However, the kind of massive jump was, oh, well, hello, all the world's been doing Agile for a while. And these were skills that I just weren't sharp. I hadn't evolved in my time kind of managing Excel spreadsheets and budgets in my previous role. It was a massive, steep learning curve. And I went into ThoughtWorks when my second was 9 months old. So again, had a lot going on, went back to consulting, which, like I say, I hadn't done for a while. And it was just the penny dropped one day. I was like rabbit in headlights, client facing, what's going on. And then I just remember the penny dropped. And that's the point of this, is I was like, oh, so basically, if I don't do anything I've done before and do the complete opposite, I'm kind of going to be heading where I need to go, and kind of coming away from this more hierarchical approach to doing work, a little bit more paper-based, like we had an audit trail. It was email trail for everything, over documentation. It was, process over kind of collaboration. And it was just such a beautiful feeling when I was on these amazing delivery teams at ThoughtWorks, and it was a team spirit. We're in this together. We talk through problems together. It's not, yes, everyone comes with a relevant skill set for what they're going to bring to the party, but it doesn't define you. That's not where it starts and ends.
Yeah.
Whereas I was used to, Amelia, you're the portfolio manager, you're the delivery manager. We've got this problem. What answer have you got? It was very transactional. Whereas I went into kind of an agile space, and it was just so much more collaborative. And it wasn't, classic, that Gantt chart that you wrote 12 months ago when you did the budget, Amelia, that now you're being hung out to dry on because, surprise, surprise, things have gone wrong and you're not delivering. It was, we iterate and we learn and we feedback and we grow, and, we just keep that kind of communication and collaboration going to deliver the right thing in the right and appropriate way and time. And that was just such a beautiful feeling when I could see the difference between the two and could see the value to like tech and the client and to us as a team. And the energy around that was just amazing. But it was a lot of unlearning. I had to stop asking where the document, the template, the process, the different way.
Yeah. I remember my first week. So when I again, different consultancy, government stuff, and we were doing like big projects up in Dounreay. So I was working in this like nuclear decommissioning thing, and we're doing like cyber tech and new PCs and firewalls and whatever. And I remember I needed to move. So similar to you, work-life balance had to change. I had a third kid, needed a northwest job. So I went back from consulting in-house at AT. Obviously AT, we're already, ThoughtWorks had been in on the Agile journey. And it was the bit where I read about it and I'd seen some talks about it. So I don't know how I got the job, but I got the job, came in, and I remember I went to see my cousin a few weeks later, and I couldn't stop smiling. He's like, what's up with you? I said, work's ace. And he's like, what do you mean? He goes, the things I used to hate, which were like like reporting for reporting's sake, or like trying to plan the next 3 years, like looking so far ahead and being completely separate from all the engineers. Like, sort of you're over in that booth, beavering away, doing like chants and reporting and budgets. So then you sit next to the devs you're working with and you can tangibly see what's going on. But also when there's a blocker, you can then go, okay, let's change the plan. Let's do something else. And you weren't going to get like absolutely battered. It was like pretty cathartic, like revelation. But it's the bit, isn't it? Did you find, because I kept like going, oh my God, like all those things I used to do, like you sometimes reach for them and they're not there anymore.
Yeah. Or you, I don't know, you're like, so it is the unlearning, or you find yourself saying things that are kind of like prompted by that programming of, well, shouldn't we be tracking, and it was that classic, over documentation of stuff that wasn't required. It was like documenting stuff to the right level in the right way. But I think I was, definitely from a background of over documenting stuff. And that was like a difficult thing to unlearn, but it's just time and experience. Like with anything, the more you kind of have lived experience doing things a different way, the less you reach for the things that you used to.
If someone tomorrow said you had to go back into that world, would you be able to quickly relearn it, do you think? Or is it now so anti that you'd be like, oh, like write a thing that this is what's in scope, this is what's explicitly out of scope, here's the explicit budget, blah 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 blah?
I'd probably say no, because you can just see the value, and you just know it's so superficial that it's written down, or so I think when you can see the value of a new way, I don't think I'd go back. You know what I mean? And there you go. I've just reconfirmed my previous point that I've got more confidence now to speak up. That if you'd have asked me that question maybe at a different point in my career, I would have just gone back and done it, or done it with caveats. But now I've got the confidence at this point to actually say that doesn't serve me. Yeah.
Especially when you then talk about the value. It's a bit like trying to predict 5 years in the future. You can have a loose idea, like that whole cone of uncertainty. Like, it could be here, it could be over here. But actually to say, I'm going to write it down, commit to it and all that this is what I'm going to do in 5 years' time on a program of work. It's like, are you insane? So the next topic, which again, this could be just me and you chatting for hours and hours, this one. So obviously we've been through the how actually there is times where you need to speak up, and the whole style and approach, Agile to Waterfall. So then the next one that resonated with me, you mentioned, was your transition from being a manager into a leader, and how, again, you had to very, not quickly, but adapt your way of thinking and your approach.
Yeah, this was, again, something that I've kind of reflect on. I have spoken about before, that kind of like classic light bulb moment. It was, when I was managing a team, working in-house at Vodafone, and someone that I was kind of getting a bit of mentoring from in my time there. I found the move to line management and people management really steep. Again, no one gives you kind of any advice. You kind of learning as you go a lot of the time. But I got some advice, and they said, do you think you're a good manager, a good leader? And not really kind of having my own appreciation for the difference. I was like, oh, I'm definitely a good manager, and thinking that was a great answer. And then I took some time to reflect and do my own thinking about, well, what is the difference? And I realized that, I was a very good at process following. So, you know what I mean? And tick boxing, like, have we got everything up to date? Have we done our one-to-ones? Have we, got all our leave planned out? Like super organized, but very process and operational. And I was like, but as a leader, I need to support people and encourage people to get where they need to go for themselves, for their career development, for the organization, for the team. And I'm not going to get that by ticking boxes and filling in cells on, spreadsheets in terms of, the team setup. So it was a real penny drop moment I need to kind of, A, give the team space, B, look at how I inspire them more rather than just how efficient we are as a kind of running ourselves as a team. And then that opened that whole chapter as I moved back to consultancy into that servant leadership. And I really kind of like, I have my style and I'm a certain way to kind of do work, but really understanding the people that I'm working with on my delivery teams to understand, well, what serves them? What do they need to be their best version of themselves? And that's a whole different ball game to kind of ticking boxes and following process around, leave and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was really pivotal, and I'm forever grateful that someone kind of planted that seed as well, and that I kind of, in hindsight, it opened up that whole kind of thought process for me to reflect on my own experience a lot more.
Yeah. So does that mean you've like stopped doing all the process and you just do everything your own way, or do you still follow the process as well?
I think for me, just looking at everything, just talking about Agile in general, Waterfall and, management, I think you just got to have boundaries, but there has to be trust. You know what I mean? We can't all be doing what we want when we want. There does need to be some organization, but I think it's trust and empowerment within that space. So team and people need to self-organize and kind of manage themselves a little bit. And you kind of understand where the boundaries are for like working with people, so that you can have a conversation if it's not going well, or you need to, team performance isn't where it needs to be, or delivery isn't where it needs to be, but you need to have given the team the space to kind of help them get where they're going.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Because that was one thing because we always do a little pre-chat, was when you mentioned about that, one thing that started worrying a lot in my head is that bit, again, at one of my old firms, I was really good at the process. So you'd ask where something was, I'd know internally how to do that. And it was when we came to AT of the bit where it's good and you can do that, but then being able to, like you say, is not just follow this is how, like to fill a PDP in, or this is how to approve expenses, approve leave, is also like the softer skills and like understanding the individual you're working with and what they really need, rather than it being, like you say, a tick box. But it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I still use a lot of the processes, but it's how you adapt them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like you said, like use that framework for the right reason, rather than it being you just doing it to follow the process.
Yeah. Or like, if you're very methodical and process driven, you might have your way, but people know the process is there, but they might approach and choose to kind of follow it in a different way. And that's okay, rather than my way is the right way. And I think that was the school, the time that I came into kind of leadership and management, I think it was a bit old school now in hindsight, and it did feel a little bit more one way, a bit more top down. So I just kind of put that, that was the impression that I had, and I tried to fill that space, and that's probably why it was so uncomfortable. I had such a steep learning curve because it wasn't natural to me, but I was programmed. I didn't know any other way until you have these experiences and you're like, oh, maybe I should try a different way, and you see the benefit and you're like,
it is the penny drop, isn't it, where you go, actually you can do it within the framework, but the person that you had as a mentor or line manager in the past, just because they did it one way, you don't have to do it exactly the same way. It is funny because I think it links back into like when you're saying about the Agile like mentality, but also being able to speak up and then know your own mind. It is a bit where you start to, all the like little bits of the jigsaw start to plug together, and you go, right, that's what it means, or that's how I want to do it. So it isn't then you're going off and going completely roughshod of like this process is there for a reason, but actually it's how you adapt it. So that is it is a fascinating one. So how do you find then? So this is probably not something I'm not looking at as much, but I've been speaking to some of my colleagues about, is obviously we in AT got a lot of people coming through the apprentice route, from an early careers route. Some of them are a lot younger, some are doing career change, got graduates coming in, but actually there's a new generation of people coming into product and tech. So I'm thinking, when I was advised, I'm not going to name names, not that they'd be listening anyway, but there was a guy at my first job called Wayne, and he said, this is how you do it. And now I'm thinking, this is not how you do it. But how do you then look at going, this is how we do it, but how do you make sure like the way we do it is probably might not be the way that new people coming into the industry do it?
Yeah, this is a great question. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, especially in light of this conversation and some other. I think it's just, there's a fine balance, isn't it? It's like we have experienced people that have kind of been in different roles. We've got different lived experience, and we've just said you get the value of that. We've done all the trial and error, and we do what we do on a day-to-day basis to kind of share that experience and help, you know, other people as they come into the company avoid the pitfalls that we had. But then that also has got to be balanced and tempered with, but it is a new generation and they've taken different career paths, not the same as us, different educational routes, you know, kind of, you've got so many career changes coming into tech now, which is amazing. So it's almost finding the balance of, you know, that this experience we have is here and it's helpful to kind of share, but knowing that the way we did things isn't the blueprint for how it should be done in its entirety. So it's listening to the new people coming into any tech organization, listening and really hearing what works for them, what do they need. And like anything, it's a conversation, it's a discussion, and it's it's a balance of what works for people today what we know is kind of a well-trodden path that actually serves us well in this organization, in this industry. So with anything, there's trial and error. You know, there's many organizations, especially as we move into this more kind of advanced hybrid working, that you trial and error different things, but as long as you're getting feedback from your people and it's kind of balanced, you know, across the organization, you're more informed to kind of find processes and ways to kind of keep and retain people that work for them. Like, I've got a great friend, she is kind of head of people for a fintech, and she does a lot of reverse mentoring. You know, her background is in people, it's not in kind of software development, for example. So she has a number of software engineers in her company that reverse mentor her, so to help her. So I think it's important for all of us to kind of stop and listen and learn and iterate on how we do things to kind of build that in.
Yeah. I went to a talk, it's ages ago, and it was Brian Dove, who, I don't know if he's still at Skyscanner. I think he might be, at one point he was the CEO, but he did a talk on the reverse mentoring and how working with his boss started to appreciate engineering culture and what the engineers needed. But also then he started to learn obviously more about the business. So it is an interesting one, because I find this with me. I've got a 15-year-old son, and it's funny because there's stuff where I'm like, this is how you do it. And he's like, no, this is how you do it. And I'm like, whoa, that's way faster. And it is a bit, isn't it, where just like, I always use my kids as analogies, but it's the bit of listening to the way maybe other people are doing it might change the way you're doing it. We might be, again, me and my son are poles apart and stuff, but there's just little things I go, oh my God, I've not really thought about it that way. So it is fascinating. Have you found anything like real tangible things where you've gone, I've now worked with a new set of people coming in that have fundamentally changed anything, or is it just fine tuning?
I think for me, the biggest kind of reverse mentoring kind of experience that I had, being a very people focused person, my default, my blueprint is, you know, I love the balance we get. Like I say, I did burn out a bit with a young family, being in Manchester, commute, breakfast clubs, after school club, you know, 5 days a week. I love the balance of hybrid working. But my version of success in that space is very, very different to other people, you know. And I spent a lot of time in one of my roles where I was on a leadership team. We had 180 people between us in the region that we were working with. And, you know, my default is some days in the office are good, aren't they? Because, you know, you can connect with people and, you know, it's got all these benefits. And there was a bit of enlightenment process that just because that works for me, but, you know, I'm not a software engineer. I don't have all my kit set up at home. I haven't, you know, necessarily got multiple screens, all these different, you know, and I was speaking to a few people about what good looks like in terms of that balance with office culture and hybrid working, because we hadn't worked out a particular kind of routine or process. And the reverse mentoring I got was, you know, actually being at home for the proportion of the time works for me better because of all these different reasons, that because they're not in my day-to-day working world, I hadn't considered.
Yeah.
So I think, and that was obviously only in the last few years that it really opened my eyes up for how often on a range of topics, whether it's how you actually get stuff done in your role, or, you know, the balance of kind of building the right culture in an organization, just stopping and listening because you don't know what you don't know, whether that be roles or levels of experience. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. No, I think that whole, the approach to hybrid working has been like watching how other people do it, and how, like, some people love to be in 5 days a week because they love the office. Other people, they want to have, like myself, I like a little bit of time at home to do focus stuff, but then love the energy of the office. So I think that's where I can see we've learned from, well, we look at feedback all the time of how do you then get the sweet spot, because you're always going to have extremities, but how do you get the sweet spot? So thinking about that, the whole distributed world then, so is there, in your current role in terms of eco experts, has that been something that has changed and you've had to, because obviously being a global company as well, is that something where it's even more stretched in terms of how you operate in a distributed world, or is it is that something that you were on that trajectory anyway of how you work there?
No, I think the pandemic was fun. In consulting, it was wild. Like literally up until the day we all kind of got told to work from home at different, we were all on client site 5 days a week. If anything, we were a bit behind the curve a little bit, considering tech can be a little bit more front facing in number of trends. I think our way of working was still a bit out of date. So it forced that change. I think consulting has definitely benefited from the hybrid. Obviously, like a lot of different tech companies, we've struggled to come back and find that good balance because you're working with clients. It's important you work alongside them, you understand them, their problems, their culture, to really kind of align and build the best shaped product for them. So again, yeah, it's been fluid in finding what's right for, clients in general, along with people on the teams. But I think just the right touch points at the right time is enough. And I think that balance of interaction v deep work, which is easier said than done to find, but we've all had, a number of years trying to find that sweet spot, and a number of places are kind of getting there or at a decent point in the journey. So it has been a balance, but I think we've benefited from it, and we're kind of rebuilding what's the best working pattern as a result of that.
Yeah, it does it was obviously awful times, pandemic, hated it, but it was one, it forced like thinking. I know it was straight off, wasn't it, like everyone from home, but then coming back is actually trying to be really meaningful and purposeful of, this is the pattern for this organisation, how we're going to absolutely smash it. So it's funny because all the way through the things we talk about, there's been moments like that just trigger that one. So just thinking then, like just to wrap up from a career development perspective, one of the things you talked about is, and you talked about at the beginning, like work-life balance, is how then you started to think about how, rather than making you fit the role, making the role fit you, which is, again, I haven't really thought about it, but it's like over time, especially when you're in a place for a while, is you can start to see how things start to mold more close. It's like wearing a t-shirt. You put it on straight away and it's like dead square, and then after a bit you start to feel quite comfortable in it. So what's your big learning takeout on that side of things?
Yeah, I think this is probably my kind of latest, in certain timeline perspective, my latest kind of reflection and takeaway. I think, a number of people, definitely me, at that point starting my career, you think it's very linear, which we've discussed it's not. I didn't know where I would kind of cap out. I was like very career driven, love learning, evolving myself. But it's only in the last few years that you're like, your title or your external kind of view of what your career looks like, actually, so that being the kind of more top down view, is actually how I want my day to look and feel. What do I want that to look like?
Yeah.
How do I want to turn up at work? What touch points, what interaction do I have? What's the type and level of conversation I want to be having? How do I want to show up at home and with my kids? And what do I want my working week to look like? And I just realized that was a more bottom up. It was like, well, let's me focus on how I want to shape the day and kind of find a role to kind of blend and fit that, rather than always kind of doing the role at hand, like we say, not speaking up, looking at that next promotion, regardless of what impact that would make for me. So I think the last few years I've kind of been like, oh, I know what lights me up at work and what lights me up at home, and I'm empowered and, like we said, kind of more confident and driven enough to kind of own how that works for me a lot more than I would have done much earlier in my career. I think I was so kind of struck with the shiny stuff and career development, but in these kind of later years, I'm like, I just want to do really valuable work, deliver some great things in tech, and kind of have fun while doing it, but yet still be present for myself and my family.
So we did some internal videos when we were coming back to the office around connected working. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, whatever. And it was like, I can't remember what the strapline they used. For me, it might be at my most energized or something. Still see it now and again on recruitment threads. I'm like, oh God. But it was the bit where when we started going back into connected working, this is what we call our like hybrid, like in the office, out of the office, but being connected. But the thing, like you said, is I realised little things like getting up early and going on my bike, because in the evening I've got things to do with the kids, and then maybe doing a first call on the way in, which is like just a bit of a team check-in. Little things like that, like not necessarily stand up, but it was like doing certain things I could do in like a different way. Whereas beforehand, I would not have had any sort of confidence to say, I'd be thinking I need to be in it like 7:30 and I need to leave it like 6:30. Is that bit of suddenly you're going, making it work for you, because if you make it work for you, actually, and it's working for everybody else, it's like, it's win-win, win-win, rather than trying to force myself into a square, being a round peg into a square hole. But I think it does take confidence and trust, doesn't it, in the organisation you work for or in yourself to go, this is how I'm going to make that work. But hopefully this is the beauty of like connected working or hybrid working, that is a thing that sticks forever.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I'm definitely seeing the benefits. It makes, like you say, all the tough times kind of work it coming through and seeing the benefit individually. Because, that was a reflection of mine, that one size fits all way of working. And now you look at how different people are and what they all want and need. It's mad to think that we kind of thought we'd get the best out of everyone with that one approach.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? Because even though, but I think it's the bit is there's a framework you can put in that fits all, but it's then the nuances and the individualism within it. If you can get that right, so it's like you feel like you're owning it, but then you're not owning it in a way that then completely conflicts with somebody else. So then it becomes a win-lose. I think that's the sweet spot.
Yep.
So I think I'm just looking at my production crew who are all like, give me the cut signs. Give me the cut sign? No, not really. But I think we've gone a little bit. Well, I've got a little bit over, but we could keep going for hours and hours and hours. So that was that was super interesting. It was like you were in my mind sometimes. Like, you was a BA and I went to a project. Like, yeah, that's what I did as well. So, well, thanks for coming over. I know you got something else you got on later this evening, so good luck with that. I'm sure that if people are interested, they'll be able to hook you up on the likes of LinkedIn to chat further. So thanks for coming over. It's been much appreciated. Big thanks as always to listeners and viewers for tuning in to yet another episode of Roadmap. My voice is about to go, so remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, hit the notification button so you never miss an episode, and follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And that's us done. Cheers for that.
Thank you.
Cheers, Amelia.